Hey adventurers, so today is going to be my review for A Haunt for Jackals by J.L. Odom. This is the second book in the Land of Exiles series. This is of course a fantasy series, it is absolutely a fantasy series. Although it's very low on magic. There's not very much magic that is seen or visualized or anything like that, although there's some hints, there's some implications that maybe this is magic, maybe it's just cultural, maybe who knows what this is. But it is definitely fantasy for sure. This is military fantasy. There's a lot of military aspects to this. In fact, this is about a soldier in the midst of an army and what's going on around him and all of that stuff. And so it's absolutely military fantasy. There's a lot of religious aspects and cultural aspects to this series as well, and I feel like Odom does a fantastic job dealing with those. But anyways, let's get into this. A Hunt for Jackals is book 2 of the Land of Exiles series by J.L. Odom, and is a worthy successor, a fantastic successor to the first book, which is By Blood, by Salt. This book continues where book 1 left off and digs even further into, of course, the story, but our characters as well. And I think that that's one of the ways that this series shines, is how much we're digging into the lives of these characters, or the way that they think, the way that they act, the choices that they make, and why. We build out character relationships and dynamics. We fight many more battles, continue politicking and experiencing the world, all the while pushing the story even further. And so there's a lot of story that's going into this series, but there's all these other things that are pulled in as a way of furthering that story, but not just for the sake of moving the story along, but rather that those are the story. Those events are the things that make up the story. Before I get into the main body of this review, though, I just quickly like to say welcome to an Erudite adventure. I'm T. If you're liking what you're seeing from us, please like, comment, and subscribe. So I might as well get into what negatives I have for this series and get those out of the way first, so that we can just go into all the things that I really enjoyed about this book. And that is primarily the audiobook. I'm not a huge fan of the audiobooks on these, and that is absolutely a me thing. I've heard some people say that no, the audiobooks work fantastic and they're perfect for them. So again, that's 100% a me issue. I'm not the biggest fan of the audiobooks, and that there's nothing wrong with that. That's my opinion. I'm not trying to talk bad about the narrator or anything, and I do think that he is a good narrator. It doesn't work for me, and that's really it. And I think that that's mostly just with this story. I feel like I want just a slightly different voice for this specific story. But a kind of good thing that comes about from that is also kind of a negative, because I can't just passively listen and understand, is it does force me to be very intentional about listening so I don't miss something, because there's a lot that's going on here that I could very easily miss out an important piece of. But by listening to this audiobook, I have to pay so close of attention that I don't miss out on that stuff. Okay, so into the rest of this though. Odom builds on everything she set up in book 1. Just absolutely everything is furthered and continued, and there's a whole lot that was established, but now we're just building on every aspect of it. But one of the most prominent and interesting aspects to me is that of the relationship between Azetla and Saul. Though those two characters and the way that they interact, and the story that started between them in book 1 and how that's progressed unto the point that we're at, I find is fascinating. I think that it's really well done, and I'm absolutely invested in that relationship. There's so much to those two characters and the reasons why this works for me. But the fact that they're both essentially outsiders, that's fascinating, and looked down upon, or at least viewed as different, makes for a very interesting dynamic. The two of them are both outsiders, but in different ways. They're both viewed as different and separate and lesser in two completely different ways, but at the same time, they see that between themselves, and they're drawn together because of that. That's a way for them to bond in some ways, but at the same times it's also pushing them apart, pushing against them, and it creates for a very interesting dynamic. Plus, learning more about the history of Zal really brings all of that into focus for us. We learn so much about Zal's history and how that's woven into this story and into the relationship between Zal and Azetla and everything. I just find it fascinating. I find it really well done. I also love how much we are dealing with battle, strategy, and the cost of war. It's something that sometimes can get overlooked and glossed over in other series that are heavy on battles and stuff like that. Whereas here, it's just once again abundantly clear that Odom well knows her subject, and it just comes out beautifully, and it comes out very naturally, and it comes out very detailed, yes, but also very accurate, very precise, very intentional. But to take a step deeper into this, the politics of that war specifically, not just the the ramifications of a battle or something like that, but also just the politics and how that affects governments and how they're interacting with other governments and things like that. Odom does a great job at weaving all that politics into the story as well. That is something that I rarely see discussed within fantasy storytelling, and it adds to the depth and power of this series a ton. It really fleshes out and builds out that world a lot. And then there are the cultures. I've mentioned many a time that I love exploring cultures. I love getting to learn languages and cultures and seeing how an author delves into those things. Anytime we get to look at a new culture and just spend some time with them and learn their customs, learn the way that they act, the way that they think, I love that. That's something that works really well for me. And here is no different. All that word contains, all that the word culture contains is in this book. Language, way of thinking, traditions, and especially religion, because a lot of fantasy series just kind of remove the religion and you are left with a culture that there's something missing because there's no religion, and religion is such a human experience, such a part of humanity, that without religion, your culture is lacking in something. That is one of the aspects that really stands out to me. I seem to recently have been reading quite a few books with strong and well done religious themes that are not pushy or preachy, and I really appreciate that. I really appreciate a more subtle but realistic look at religion within fantasy. And Odom's execution of this is among the best that I've read, to be quite honest. All of that is something that I find fascinating and have for years. I love languages and cultures and getting to explore them just a little bit deeper. And it is all so realistic, but also respectful. And of course, with Odom pulling from real world cultures and real world religions and weaving those into this story, there has to be of course we can change things, we can play with things, and we can use them as a outline or a guide but we can change things as necessary. But Odom does such a good job at being realistic and respectful to the real world cultures and religions that she's pulling from. Overall, though, I feel like I'm not getting everything out of these books that I could or even should. I find that they are some of the most intriguing and complicated books that I've read. I'm constantly interested. I'm constantly thinking, well, how does this work? Why is this way that it is? What is making this story progress the way that it is? Why is it all crafted in the way that Odom has chosen to craft it? And so I'm constantly interested. I pause the book and I am very interested in pressing play again. That's a great aspect of reading books by audiobook, and a great judge of how interested I am in something is if I can press pause and I want to continue or I don't want to continue. There's been a lot of books that I don't necessarily want to continue, but these books by Odom, even with me not loving the narration, I still want to continue with that story. I'm constantly interested and I enjoy every minute of them. The ending of book 2 made me immediately want book 3. It's pretty important, impactful ending, and I definitely want to read book 3 as soon as I can. But seeing as it isn't out yet, I will continue to wait, and I can be patient. I'm not opposed to being patient, but I want it. I'm ready for it. I also would love to reread these physically at some point. I would love to reread By Blood, by Salt and A Haunt for Jackals, both physically. Own the books, put them on my shelf because I quite like the covers as well. But I want them on my shelves because I want to physically reread them at some point. The problem is I physically read so slowly, and I don't know when I will be able to get back to those. But that's a different topic, different time for that conversation. But I would really love to reread these physically, where I can really dig in and see all the intricacies of Odom's work and build on the baseline of understanding that I'm getting from them, but also just dig even deeper with a physical reread specifically. And though it's a little thing, I really appreciate that these books are clean. I know that there's so many readers who aren't bothered by language or adult content, but I just really don't like it. And to have books that are this powerful, this complicated, this strong and complex, but they're also clean, it just makes me so happy, and it makes me enjoy them all the more. And the weird thing is, this is a book in a series where adult content and language would make a lot of sense. It would fit the world, it would fit the story that's going on and the characters and the situations. But the fact that Odom can portray all that without the need of going into those things, I again, makes me appreciate it all the more. Odom chooses not to do that, and that's a great thing for me. I really like that. So anyways, that is my review for A Haunt for Jackals by J.L. Odom, book 2 of the Land of Exiles series. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday and have our social medias linked in the description down below. We will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.